Zion to the Celtics, plus Porzingis back? 2 trades now. If you're a Celtics fan, I know exactly the feeling. You open your feed and it's rumor after rumor, and at the end of the day, there's that question. What's real and what's just clickbait? So today, I'm going to make your life easier. In 30 seconds, I'll tell you what's really going on. Zion on the Celtics. Does it make sense, or is it a trip? And Porzingis, is it just noise, or is there a real signal back? What's more, I separated 2 exchanges that are circulating right now with what each one changes in the team: rotation, defense, attack, and title ceiling. Stay with me until the end because I'll show you the most likely scenario and what Boston needs to do to avoid making a mistake. Let's do it. Before getting into the 2 trades and Zion's story, quickly, if you're a real Celtics fan, subscribe to the channel now, because here you won't miss any updates. And I always separate what's rumored from what has a source and logic. And leave a like, because this shows me that you want more videos like this and makes YouTube deliver to more Boston fans. Also, activate the bell, because when there is breaking news, I release a video and you arrive first. Now I want your participation. Would you like Zion in Boston? Yes or no? Comment below while I show you what's really going on and why these 2 trades could completely change the Celtics. Let's go to the video. Breathe with me for a moment, because today the subject is one that seems simple on the surface. Rumors, exchanges, market. But when we pull the thread, we realize that there is a much bigger story behind it. And it's a story that directly affects what the Boston Celtics are today, what they could be tomorrow, and the type of risk the franchise is willing to take. I want to start with the point that almost no one likes to face. The Boston Celtics, the way they are set up, are not just a team trying to win games. It's a team trying to win on the court and, at the same time, win a parallel battle off it. The battle of money, taxes, aprons, punishments. And when a franchise enters this zone, every decision stops being just basketball and becomes basketball with consequences. And it is in this scenario that the Porzingis story, the market confusion involving the Hawks and Clippers, the talk about McCollum, and mainly the name Zion Williamson begin to connect. Not like a straight line, but like a web. And the web is like this. You move one end, the rest shakes. Let's go in parts. 1. Porzingis in Atlanta. When expectation meets reality. When Atlanta brought Porzingis, the promise was clear. Now go. It was the kind of move that signals ambition, a team that wants to rise to the next level, that wants to be taken seriously in the East. And if you look at it on paper, you can understand the optimism. Size, spacing, ability to score, protect the rim, change the game without having to monopolize the ball. But basketball doesn't happen on paper. It happens in the body. It happens on a daily basis. And injury is not just an inconvenient detail. Injury changes the rhythm, changes the rotation, changes the team's confidence, even changes what the coach feels safe in calling in decisive moments. The result is that Atlanta arrived at Christmas with a 15-16 record and a losing streak that weighs on the locker room and weighs on patience, because there is a type of average that fans even tolerate when they are building something. But there is another type of average, the worst of them, that happens when you invested to take a leap, and even so, remain stuck in the same place. And here comes the burning question. When expectations were so high and reality becomes a stumbling block, what does a team do? Do you insist and believe that it will improve, or recalculate the route? This is where the idea of changing course and switching starts to gain traction. 2. The detail that changes everything. Boston, costs, and painful decisions. Now, the part that changes the tone of the conversation. Porzingis is not just an asset in Atlanta. He is part of a path that began in Boston. And when Boston moves, especially in sequence, we need to pay attention to the real reason, not the reason that looks more beautiful to the public. When the Celtics make strong moves in less than 24 hours, involving important pieces, big contracts, additions that shake up the backbone of the squad, the sign could be competitive aggressiveness, but it could also be something else, financial urgency, because behind the best team on the court, there is the math of the luxury tax. And when this math tightens up, there is no such thing as romanticism. There is a front office trying to protect the franchise from a cost that could become an anchor. This type of decision, when it happens, is rarely because someone wanted it. It's usually because someone had to. And when information comes in about a heavy scenario, such as a serious injury to its main player, something at the level of the Achilles tendon which changes the immediate horizon, the front office is pushed into choices he didn't want to make. And then you understand why decisions seem harder, because they are. Nobody likes to give up value, but sometimes the price of not letting go now is even worse later. 3. Health, the human part that changes what we see on the court. I want to touch on one point carefully because it's important and it's human. When an athlete says that in the playoffs, their heart rate could rise to 130 beats per minute just by standing, and describes it as, "It was like being hit by a truck." That's not a footnote. This is the heart of the story. We watch games and evaluate performance as if it were just decision and execution. But there are things you just can't want more of. There are things you can't control when screaming. If there is a condition like POTS in the conversation, for example, this changes the short and long-term scenario. And even if a large proportion of people respond to treatment, there is still uncertainty. And uncertainty is a term the NBA hates, because the NBA is an environment where every minute, every salary, and every draft pick needs to be justified. So, when a team evaluates Porzingis, they are not just evaluating the player. He is evaluating the entire package: availability, risk, projection, cost, impact on the salary cap, impact on the future. And that's why his story, as much as it's about basketball, is also about human limits. 4. Clippers, Hawks, and a market that looks like chaos, but has logic. Now let's move on to a part that seems like a maze. The conversations involving the Clippers and Hawks, with names like Ivica Zubac and Bogdan Bogdanović, as well as Porzingis himself, and a set of picks and swaps that make anyone stop and think, does this make sense? Let's be honest. When you see a team that isn't a clear title contender, and that's 15-16, consider paying 2 first-round picks and 2 swaps for a center. Your first reaction is, why? Because there is a huge difference between solving a need and acting like you are one piece away from the trophy. If Atlanta were flying, maybe the reasoning would be, let's close the squad and attack the top. But with an average campaign, this seems like too high a bet. And there's more. If the target player is out for weeks with an ankle sprain, the risk increases. You're not just buying talent, you are buying wasted time. On the other hand, the Clippers going through a difficult season with a very bad campaign, despite their name and role, also fall into a complicated logic. They may feel pressured to make changes because they do not have full control over their own draft pick. When you don't have your first round, losing becomes even more painful because you suffer the defeat and still feed the future of another team. So the Clippers might look at the market and think, we need a spark. We need someone who can produce immediately, and that's where the name CJ McCollum comes in. 5. McCollum. The obvious fit that also has pitfalls. McCollum is that type of player who, in trade discussions, appears whenever a team needs scoring, creation, and experience. He's a ready-made package. He arrives, takes shots, organizes some possessions, makes the defense adjust. And when you look at Washington with a bad campaign, at the bottom of the table, the logic of rebuilding clashes with a 34-year-old veteran on an expiring contract. In theory, he has value for a team that wants to compete now, and value is exactly what a rebuilding team needs to turn into future assets. The point is, a big contract makes things complicated. Not everyone can fit in, but an expiring contract can also make things easier because it doesn't lock the team in for many years. And here, for Boston, an indirect connection arises. When a move with McCollum also involves pieces like George Niang, Peyton Pritchard, Bogdanović, and also changes the Celtics' position in relation to the second apron, you realize that there is a double motivation: improving the team and easing the financial burden. This is the type of exchange that, for fans, always has 2 readings. The first reading is the one everyone likes. Great, we're adjusting to get stronger. The second reading is the one that bothers us. We are moving because money is in charge. And this is where I want you to pay attention, because this directly connects to the next point. 6. Anfernee Simons and the silence that makes noise. There are times when silence says more than any press conference. When executives around the league repeat that Boston is still trying to move Anfernee Simons, that in itself is a narrative. Because when a team is really calm, it doesn't need to prove calm. He simply acts. And Simons, as a player, can be useful. scoring from the bench, reasonable efficiency, ability to keep the attack alive when the team needs to survive minutes without its protagonists. This type of piece in a competitive scenario has value, but the league isn't just about utility. It's about cost, penalty, projection. If Boston needs to give up more than $12 million to avoid stiff penalties, and Simons carries an expiring contract worth $27.7 million, the math points to him as the most direct route. Direct? Yes. Easy? No. Because the market also has a memory and a clock, and other front offices look at the calendar and think, why am I going to pay now if I can wait and negotiate later? And then the dilemma arises that hurts fans. If Boston needs to attach a draft pick just to take away salary, is that a smart strategy, or is it panic in disguise? First-round pick is not a detail. It's the future. It's flexibility. It's the chance to remain strong even when the cycle changes. A team that wants to dominate for years needs to protect choices as if they were oxygen. But there is also another side. Staying still has a cost. Because when you are trapped by your own success, every contract weighs heavily. Every move seems more expensive, and you start trading with minimal margin. And at that moment, a player stops being just a player and becomes a symbol of the squeeze. Simons becomes a symbol. The big question, then, is tough. Does Boston sacrifice part of the future to protect the present, or bet that patience won't end up shooting itself in the foot? And this is exactly where the name Zion Williamson becomes more than a rumor. It becomes a test of courage. 7. Zion, the limit of patience and the size of the prize. Let's say it honestly and without cruelty. Zion is a phenomenon that the NBA hasn't seen for long enough, and that's what makes it so frustrating. Because his flashes are not good. They are dominant. They are from someone who changes the geometry of the court, who makes the defense collapse, who becomes an unanswerable problem when it is intact. But his career also became a tiring cycle. Come back, show, stop. Come back, show, stop. And there comes a time when the league starts to ask itself not if he's any good, but if he can be trusted. A New Orleans talks rotation adjustment, minutes limit, careful management. And it all makes sense, until the point where the fan realizes that the speech becomes a repetition and reality doesn't change. And when the team starts to lose faith, the conversation changes tone. The asset continues to be valuable, but fear begins to clash with the potential. And this is where the discount scenario is born. Not money discount, but perception discount. Now, think about it with me. If executives are asking themselves, what would happen if a contender managed his body better than New Orleans managed? That's not just speculation. It's opportunity reasoning. And Boston, in that sense, would be a very specific destination. Because Boston has structure. Boston has internal charging. Boston has spacing. Boston has 2 elite wings that can share responsibility and allow Zion to not carry the world on his shoulders. It wouldn't have to be the whole plan. He would be the piece that finishes, that punishes mismatch, that puts pressure on the rim, and changes the game in the decisive minutes. And there is a phrase that sums up the difference between an ordinary team and a contender. The contender doesn't ask you to save the franchise. He asks you to complete the puzzle. The Celtics, if they actually enter this conversation without touching on Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, change the math. Because that's not a sacrifice of the core. It's a high-impact bet around the core. And then comes the question that no one likes to answer out loud, but that defines championships. Is Zion, even with the risk, worth more than playing it safe with role players and flexibility? Because playing it safe also has a price. The price of waiting for the perfect scenario may be the price of seeing the window pass. And when you look around and see other teams hunting for stars, Lakers, Heat, Knicks, each with their own philosophy, Boston can offer something few others can: system, discipline, space, and responsibility. It's an environment where, if Zion fails, the context excuse weakens, and if he succeeds, the East will change its balance from one day to the next. And that's why this conversation is so serious. 8. The conclusion I want to leave you. In the end, it all comes down to a choice: fear or potential. Boston is in a rare position, elite on the court, pressured off it. And when you're under pressure, you need to decide whether you're going to move smartly or desperately. The market is full of smoke, but there's real fire here. The financial situation, the contracts, the need to keep the window open, and the opportunity to pounce on talent that, for obvious reasons, may be more available than it should be. The question is no longer just, will Zion be traded? The question is, who is brave enough to accept that at certain times, the biggest risk is not taking the risk? And now, I want to make this a conversation between us, because that's the spirit of the Celtics Talk Show. If you were in B's shoes, Brad Stevens, what would be your priority today? Protect the future at any cost? Or accept a calculated risk to try to change the immediate destiny of the franchise? Tell me in the comments which side you choose and why. I'm going to read it calmly because this type of debate, when it's done responsibly, is what separates internet noise from serious basketball talk. And this is exactly where the story gets dangerous, because when you add financial pressure, a title window, and a market full of uncertainty, the Celtics enter that point where any move could change the direction of the franchise. If Boston chooses the conservative path, it may even maintain stability, but it runs the risk of seeing the window narrow without realizing it. If he is aggressive and gets it right, he can put the East on alert immediately. And that's what makes this moment so decisive. It's not just about exchange, it's about identity. It's about understanding whether the Celtics will play to stay strong or to be dominant. Now I want to know your opinion, because it completely changes the reading of this scenario. Would you bet on Zion's ceiling, despite the risk? Or would you protect the future and maintain the current path? Leave your comment, because I'll pin the best analyses and bring the answers in the next video. And if you want to dive even deeper, with complete analysis, context, fits, and what each movement really changes in the team, go to the pinned comment and click on the Celtics Analysis playlist. I organized everything there for you to marathon and understand the Celtics like few people do. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the bell, because if this bomb really goes off, you'll want to be here before everyone else. See you in the next video.